records of these things have been kept, it seems that church attendance increases dramatically after tragedies happen in life. It seems church attendance increases dramatically following tragedies that happen in life. For instance, church attendance went up in 1906 after the San Francisco fires and the Los Angeles County earthquakes that happened that year. Church attendance went up after Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7th, 1941, and it stayed up throughout most of the World War II. Church attendance then declined and then went back up during the Cuban Missile Crisis, those 13 days in October of 1961. People went back to church, got their eyes higher than the horizon of their own humanity. And then, of course, church attendance went up by 66% for 9 whole months after September 11th, 2001. So it seems to me that suffering, if there's a redeemable side to suffering, is that it helps us to recommit to what matters most in life, when life isn't fair. Now, what matters most is going to vary from person to person. I understand that. What matters most to some of you over here might not be as important to you over here. What matters most to me might not be as important as to what matters most to you in life. But it seems to me that most people, what they tend to recommit to through the suffering when life isn't fair is they recommit to God. Now, maybe it's only for 9 months and then it falls away when life gets good again. But it does seem to me pretty consistent that suffering helps us to recommit to what matters most in life when life isn't fair. And so now we come to the part of the conversation in Job where there seems to be a lull. It seems to be like a contemplative moment where Job kind of takes a step back. Now he's angry, he's frustrated, he's confused. He's ticked off at the world, and he has every right to be. He's knocked down, but he's not knocked out. He's beaten up, and he's on death's door, but right on death's door, we find Job recommitting to what matters most. Job, in 26 verse 1 or verse 2, it says, "Then Job replied," and he's still talking to his friends here. He says to them, "How have you helped the powerless? How have you saved the arm that is feeble?" He's talking about himself. Remember all of his 27 symptoms that he's got going on? He's on death's door. He's the guy still laying in the hospital bed. And he looks over at him and he says, "How have you helped me at all? What advice have you offered to one without wisdom? And what great insight have you displayed? Who has helped you utter these words?" Check out this next line. "And whose spirit spoke from your mouth?" Who are you hearing from? Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar? It's sure not the Spirit of God. He's accusing them of hearing either from their own imaginations or maybe possibly from another spirit, but it's not God. They probably took insult to that too, as they probably should have. They probably would have said something like, "Well, we resent that remark," and Job probably would have said, "No, you resemble that remark." And so then Job in chapter 27, he commits to what matters most in life. In Job 27, picking it up in verse 2, Job says, "For as surely as God lives, who has denied me justice, the Almighty, who has made my life bitter." Now, he doesn't know what's going on here, right? So he's still going back to God in his own humanity, going, "God must be doing this to me. I don't know why, but I haven't done anything to deserve this, so it must be God's fault. God's going to fix that at the end of the book." But don't get on Job's case, because Job didn't have our perspective that we have. "As surely as God lives," verse 3, "as long as I have life within me, the breath of God in my nostrils, my lips will not say anything wicked, and my tongue will not lie. I will never admit that you are right. Until I die, I will not deny." There's that word again, my integrity. That rope that keeps me tethered and tied to God in a trust relationship. That when I get to the end of it, I hang on to it for dear life. I will not deny my integrity. I will maintain my innocence and never let go of it. My conscience will not be a reproach to me as long as I live. And I will teach you about the power of God, about the ways of the Almighty. I will not conceal. In the middle of surviving through the suffering of the situation and the circumstance of whatever you are surviving through, you need to come to a place like Job came, and you need to simply recommit to what matters most in your life. And that is your trust in God's sovereignty and your trust in yourself, in your own integrity. And some of you might say, oh, Pastor, I don't think it's right that we trust ourselves. Job did. Job said, I will trust in God, but I will also not let go of my integrity. I know who I am. I know who I am. I know I love God. I know I haven't done anything wrong. I know bad things are happening to me. But I will continue to trust God's sovereignty. The reason you need to recommit to trusting God's sovereignty and your own integrity is because in the middle of your suffering from time to time, people will come around your lives wanting to comfort you. And in the midst of them wanting to comfort you, because people don't know what to say all of the time, and sometimes there just isn't anything to say, sometimes they will say the wrong things. And the wrong things that they will say will test the strength of your trust in God and in yourself, in who you are, in your relationship with God. Will test your integrity. Now, they might not mean to. They may not be like Eliphaz, Zophar, and Bildad and do it seemingly intentionally, like throwing darts against you of accusation and speculation. But in their spiritual speculation as to try and figure out why has this bad thing happened to you, or why is it continuing on like this, it's human nature. It really is human nature for us to say, well, maybe God's testing you. Book, chapter, and verse. Please, someone tell me, where does it say in all of the Bible that God tests people through suffering and through sin? In fact, James 1:13 says God does not test people through suffering or through sin. In fact, Romans 10:17, it says, bad things happen to good people, but God is the one who turns the bad into good for those who love him and live according to his purposes. Job proves to us in his life that God wasn't doing this to him. It was Satan doing this to him, trying to kill, steal, and destroy Job's relationship with God, that God had all the confidence in. Have you ever considered my servant Job? There's nobody like him on earth. Remember that? So when someone comes along to try and comfort you and out of their best intentions says something stupid, like, well, maybe this is just a test. And if you've ever said that to somebody else, instead of being insulted, be educated in what I just said. And please don't say it anymore to anybody else. And tell your friends not to say that either. Because God doesn't do these things. Job proves this. Scriptures prove it. I remember last year, I watch Documentary Channel, I watch the History Channel. I like stuff like that. And I remember as one of those channels that they were showing the monster storms from last year across the United States. But there was this older couple, I won't throw an age on them, I'll just say they were older. Older couple in Moore, Oklahoma being interviewed after the storm. And they said, how did you get through it? And he said, my wife and I, and they were shaken and everything, but they dealt with it wonderfully, actually, I think. But yeah, of course, they were still afraid. And so he said, we laid in our bathtub. I pulled a mattress down over us, and we clung to each other. And then the husband made a little quip, a little joke. He said, because they had said they'd been married for like 40 years at that point. He said, that was the worst part of our vows. Because the interviewer said, have you ever been through anything worse than that? And the gentleman quipped in, he said, no. He said, being married to her is a wonderful thing, and we have a wonderful life. That, going through that storm, that was the worst part of our vows. You know, being a Christian is kind of like being married. If you go to Ephesians chapter 5, it's really like being married because it lays it out right there. That our relationship with God is being His bride and He is our husband. And there's a for better or worse clause that comes with the marriage. You know, whenever we go through premarital counseling, we've got about 3 marriages coming up this summer. We're going through premarital counseling right now, and Pastor Dan and myself, we make sure to go over that with people. Pastor Bob does too. That the vows you take on this day is not going to, you know, you're going to say for better or for worse. You're going to agree to it for better or for worse. But on the day you get married, that's not going to be the for worse day. That's going to be the for better day. But the for worse days are coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a question of when. And when those for worse days come, that's when you have to recommit to what matters most in your life, the vows you took. When you stood there and you say, I take you, and the other person said, I take you, you looked at Jesus and you said, Jesus, I take you. And Jesus looked at you and said, I take you too, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. A bonding, trust, and loving relationship that is unbroken, but is stress-tested when life is not fair. That's the relationship that you're in. That's the clause that you agreed to when you stood at the altar of grace and accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior and your Lord. So when life isn't fair, recommit to trusting God's sovereignty and the integrity of your relationship with Him. Job goes off on this analogy about trying to find wisdom from God's perspective in Job chapter 28. He says, there is a mine for silver and a place for gold, and where iron is taken from the earth, and copper is smelted from ore. They tunnel through rock to bring it to light, and to see all of its treasures. But where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? No mortal can comprehend its worth. It cannot be bought with the finest of gold, nor can its price be weighed out in silver. Certainly the price of wisdom is beyond rubies. Where then does wisdom dwell? Where does understanding come from? God alone understands the way to it, and He alone knows where it is. For He views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When He established the force of the wind and measured out the waters and laid a path up for the storms, He then looked at wisdom. He appraised it, He confirmed it, and He tested it. And then He said to the human race, reverence for the Lord is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. You see, wisdom is knowing how to live. And you really need wisdom when life isn't fair, because you really need to know how to live life when life isn't fair. And you get the wisdom for knowing how to live life when life isn't fair from having a perspective higher than the horizon of your own humanity, which can only be God's perspective from heaven. For God is the one who has measured out wisdom. He's appraised it, He's tested it, and He's told the whole human race. Wisdom for knowing how to live life when life isn't fair, it begins with me. It begins with your reverence for me. Jesus said it this way, seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness. In paraphrasing, God will take care of everything else. He'll take care of the rest if you seek God and His wisdom first. And you say, well, Pastor, how can we seek God today? The best way we can have the wisdom to live life when life isn't fair from God's heavenly perspective is simple. It is through His written word. To read it, to learn it, to live it. This is why God spoke it to 40 different writers who wrote down 66 different books that make up the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, simply so we could know and have the wisdom of God to live through our lives when life is not fair. To know where the battle comes from, to know where the struggle comes from, and to know how to survive through the suffering when life isn't fair. Because Jesus Himself said, in this world you will have trouble. But don't lose heart, for I've overcome the world. See, church, it's not a question. For the rest of you who may not be suffering from anything right now, it's not a question of if. For all of us, for all human beings, it's a question of when. When we will suffer. When life isn't fair. And what we need for those times is wisdom. How to live life from God's heavenly perspective when life on earth just isn't fair.